So we've talked about these factory 3-wire condenser fan motors, and most condenser fan motors you come across from the factory, it's going to turn in the only direction it needs, an exact fit, the exact size shaft you have, and they'll come with this little coating to protect the wires, and you'll have just the 3 wires. You'll have common, brown start, and red or whatever color for run. Most of the time black is common, but not always. So read on that diagram. So these are the 3 wires. And most of the time from the factory, you're going to have a dual run capacitor. But when this motor finally goes bad, you're going to replace it. And although it would be lovely to be able to put a factory OEM motor in there, these factory motors cost 3 to 4 times more money. You won't be able to stock all of them on your truck. You have to go back to supply house to get them. In my experience, when I needed a factory motor, it had to come in from some other state somewhere. So you're talking about a customer being without cooling for a few days and paying 4 times more money to get this factory motor back in. It's not going to happen. So you're going to be putting in most likely a universal motor. So these universal motors have a few things that are different about them. And we'll talk in another video about how to replace these motors. But we have reversible wires, so we can change the rotation. And we're going to have more wires. And what's cool is they come with the wiring schematic. But here we had a 3-wire. This one is going to be 4 wires. Here we're going to have a black wire, which is going to be our common. We have a white wire, which is going to be our run. And we have 2 brown wires. And these 2 brown wires are going to be our start windings. So here I've drawn with a dual run capacitor. And here I've left the compressor wired with my drawings. And I've included 4 wires, run, common, and then these 2 brown wires. So what I'm going to do is draw for you how this would look. And what we're going to do is take our run winding. It's going to power the capacitor, the motor. Our run winding powers the run winding of the motor. And then we black see common come home to the opposite leg. But then we have these 2 brown wires left. And these 2 brown wires specifically are going to go to the capacitor. So I'm going to add a new capacitor in here. And every time we replace a motor, we always put a new capacitor with that motor, even if the old capacitor was bad. But especially with a universal motor, they're going to have different microfarads. So I'm going to put a new one in. Maybe this new one is 7.5 MFD microfarads. It's going to have 2 terminals to it. Here's what's cool. These 2 brown wires, I put one on one side, one on the other side, and we are done. It makes it really, really, really simple. And all we have to do is find my capacitor that I dropped. Here we go. We have these 2 brown wires. Goodness gracious. What a mess I got going now. All right, we got these 2 brown wires right here. And I put one brown wire on one side. I put the new brown wire on the other side, and nothing else goes here. Now this is wired up. So I got these 2 wires. And then in this case here, I have the black wire, which is going to go to one side of the contactor with the other commons. And then the white, which is going to be my run, the opposite side of common. And then these 2 browns go by itself in its own spot. Nothing else goes there. And I always get this question, well, what about the fan terminal on that dual run? We don't use it. The HERM side, the compressor side of this dual run capacitor is probably still okay. Always check it. But if it's okay, leave it in there. Don't use that fan terminal. We don't need it. We're going to have our new capacitor for our new motor, and we're set to go. It makes it really, 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 really simple. If for some reason you wanted to use or wire it in a different way, where you wanted to have the same leg that powder and running power the capacitor, there is a way to do this. For example, if this motor was in a package unit, and this motor is way on the other side of the unit, and I have 3 wires going to this motor, and now I have 4 wires to connect to. We can still do it the old-fashioned way. I can splice in the common. I can splice in the run. And what I'm going to have left over is these 2 brown wires. Well, the brown wire that's by itself is our true start winding. So it would go to the capacitor in the control panel on the other side of the unit. This brown wire with the white stripe, all it is the same leg as run. This brown wire with the white stripe is the same as this white wire here. This is the same leg as run winding. What they've done in the motor to simplify it is they've taken the same leg that powers the run winding, and they brought an extension out and made it where it powered the new capacitor. So if there was a situation and you couldn't use the 2 brown wires, you could take this one with the white stripe, you could actually cut it off and cap it and seal it, put it out of the way, and now you're back to having 3 wires. So it is doable, but if you have room in the space, the 2 wires, mount them the 2 brown wires to its own capacitor. Make sure you mount this metal to metal to metal, upright and possible, and please, please do not leave it in the box. Do not leave it hanging there. I've seen these things. It horrifies me why somebody would think that would be okay. And if you didn't know any better, now you do. So metal to metal, metal, use some plumber strap, mount it to the casing of the unit, upright when possible. When you're putting the screws in, make sure you don't puncture the coil. One more thing while we're talking about wiring, these wires are going to be running underneath the cage of the top of that unit. You want to make sure these wires can't get eaten up by the sun. The factory unit that we worked with had its own cover for it. Most people take these and throw it away. You can reuse this if possible. If it didn't have one, it's very simple. You can take a piece of PVC, take some PVC cutters and cut this for what you need, run these wires inside of the PVC, cable tie this to the top of the unit, and it will protect it. Alternatively, you can get this flexible seal-tight stuff that we use for our main wires. We always have this scrap stuff left over. We can run it inside of this to protect it. And while we're on the same subject, I have to note this. If you're putting a new motor in, this one has it to where your reversible is right in the same spot. So I can put all this inside the conduit. But sometimes they're on the other side. Cut a short section of this, and these reversible wires need to be protected from the sun, and you can run it inside that conduit. You can cable tie it to the top of the unit, and you can protect those wires. It's really pretty easy to do. One of the things I have to notify you for is do not leave these wires sticking out of the top of the unit. For some reason, somewhere, somebody thought this was okay, and it's not. These wires stick out the top of the unit. It's just 230 volts, and it's sticking out of the top, and there's no shielding on it. It's just plain thin wire. This plastic is not UV protected. The sun eats on these. They short out. But what's more important is kids and the lives of people. What you'll have is you'll have kids come out, and they'll see these wires sticking out. Kids love the air conditioner. It makes noise. It's blowing out heat. They're fascinated by it, which maybe you were that kid. That's why you're watching these videos. But they come over and they see these, and then they touch these colorful wires, and here's 240 volts. They're touching the metal unit, and kids have died from this. So do not leave these wires sticking up. If you do see a unit with these wires sticking up, you need to notify somebody so that can be taken care of so that you can protect the life of people. I have a friend of mine that he keeps wire cutters, and he'll actually cut them off, especially multifamily facilities notorious for leaving these up. He'll cut them off. And I say, why are you cutting these off? That's vandalism. And he goes, no, I'd rather have that than somebody die, somebody lose their kid's life because some technician left this up on the top. So for sure, that's a good point. Leave these wires covered, conduit, PVC, something. And another video will talk about replacing the fan motors. A lot more goes into it. But as far as wiring goes, there's 2 brown wires to its own capacitor. You don't use that fan motor anymore. You're going to leave it away. And if you had a dual run capacitor, for example, 2 individual capacitors like we had here, you could simply do away with that jumper wire, do away with that capacitor, add your new capacitor. 1 brown wire goes there, the other brown wire on the other side, and you're done. So it's quite simple. Don't get scared about it. Follow the wires out one at a time. And if you don't know, a great way to learn is if you get a job for an AC company, go to the scrap pile and start going through and practicing wiring on units in that scrap pile, seeing different varieties of them, and it helps get your confidence up, and you can see a lot more stuff. And the more hands-on you do with it, the more you're touching it, the faster you're going to learn this.